And joining me now is Adam White, Research Fellow at the Hoover Institute, and he's also professor at George Mason University's Scalia Law School. Adam, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We just heard from our Capitol Hill correspondent, Jason Calvey, talking about the potential nominee, Judge Amy Barrett, who's been challenged by Democrats because of her religious beliefs. If she's the nominee, and I know it's still just an if, do you see that same kind of questioning repeating during confirmation hearings, and could that actually energize the base, if you will?
Well, her experience in her Seventh Circuit nomination hearing obviously galvanized her supporters and her critics. I think this time around, if she were the nominee, I think both sides would learn from the experience. I think her critics would become more subtle in their attacks, but not more pointed, but just as pointed.
Mm-hmm. So President Trump is expected to select a justice from the same list where he chose Neil Gorsuch. How is the social and political climate right now, as opposed to, a year later, as opposed to when he picked Gorsuch?
Well, this confirmation hearing would be the most explosive in a generation, regardless of when it occurs, precisely because of the justice being replaced. But the fact that it's happening right now in what may well be the most poisonous political year of recent memory, I think means we're in for something truly, truly explosive.
So how could it influence the confirmation process?
Well, I think the political heat on all sides will be ratcheted up. Everybody understands the stakes of replacing Justice Kennedy. I think Democrat supporters are going to demand real obstruction of this nomination by whatever tools necessary. Although the Democrats don't have many tools at their disposal, they're going to have to get creative.
What assurances do you think, now switching to what the conservatives would want, what assurances do you think conservatives would want in a nominee? What issues, what are the big things?
Well, the court handles so many different issues, but obviously people are focused a lot on the Supreme Court's recent work in expanding the right to abortion, the right to same-sex marriage, and so on. I think for the new nominee, the question is, will you stop expanding those rights? And then there's the second question of what to do with precedents already on the books, either in terms of limiting them or drawing them back, or, as some would hope, in some cases, overturning them altogether.
Let's expand on that a little bit more, because you say that the precedents of Roe versus Wade on the issue of abortion or Obergefell on same-sex marriage are not in immediate danger, but like you said, the expansion is. Explain a little bit more. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think a lot of progressives thought that history would continue to bend in their direction, and that these rights would continue to be expanded by the Supreme Court. Just stopping that process in its tracks is in and of itself, I think, inflaming a lot of folks on the left. Now, the question is, could Roe be overturned? Could Obergefell be overturned? That's a much more challenging proposition. It requires not just the cultural and political changes that need to occur, but then it requires legislation in the states. It requires challengers to challenge that in the state court or in the federal courts rather than in the state courts, and bring it all the way up to the Supreme Court, which would have to rule not just on the merits of the constitutional issue, but on the question of what we call stare decisis, whether old precedents should stand just for the sake of stability in the law.
Well, knowing that likely President Trump will appoint somebody who is a conservative, do you think, looking down the line here, do you think state Supreme Courts and state courts are going to eventually start to play more of a role?
Absolutely, because I think people challenging new state laws, restricting abortion or other issues of interest to the left, they'll become savvier in challenging those issues in state court. Because when you challenge a law in state court under the state constitution, it can't be further appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. We're already seeing this in Iowa, where groups are challenging the new abortion restrictions under the state constitution. There'll be more and more efforts to have these cases decided before more hospitable state Supreme Courts rather than the federal Supreme Court.
It'll be interesting to see what happens, and certainly in the near future with everything leading up before the midterm elections. Adam White, Research Fellow at the Hoover Institution. Thanks so much for your analysis.
Thank you.